15 minutes. That's the time I had left to save 180 people, including myself. My name is Robert Mitchell, but everyone calls me Bob. I'm 42 years old with over 22 years in the profession and more than 20,000 flight hours under my belt. Throughout these 2 decades in the skies, I've faced storms that seemed to come straight from hell, landings in impossible weather conditions, and situations that tested every fiber of my training. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared me for the morning of March 23, 2024. It was a sunny Saturday when I reported to Denver International Airport for United Flight 1847, bound for Atlanta. A route I knew like the back of my hand, a Boeing 737-800 that had been flying for just 3 years, and an experienced crew. Everything indicated it would be just another routine flight in my career. The first officer was Sarah Martinez, a brilliant pilot of 34 years with whom I'd flown several times before. We had perfect professional chemistry. She was meticulous, calm under pressure, and had a sharp intuition for detecting problems before they fully manifested. The cabin crew consisted of 4 experienced flight attendants led by Mike, a 15-year veteran who had dealt with pretty much everything you can imagine in commercial aviation. During the pre-flight briefing, we reviewed the weather conditions. Clear skies throughout the route, favorable winds, and a forecast arrival 30 minutes ahead of schedule. The 737-800, tail number N847UA, was spotless after the line maintenance performed the night before. All systems were functioning perfectly, and the aircraft was loaded with 180 passengers, almost full capacity for a Saturday morning. Pushback was executed punctually at 7:20 in the morning. After starting the engines, 2 CFM56 7B-24s that always inspired confidence, we began taxiing on Denver's taxiways toward takeoff. The tower cleared us for takeoff on runway 16R, and at 7:43 we were airborne. The takeoff was smooth as silk. The 737 responded perfectly to the controls, and we quickly reached our cruise altitude of 37,000 feet. Sarah was flying while I monitored the systems and maintained contact with air traffic control. It was exactly the kind of smooth flight that all pilots appreciate. No turbulence, systems functioning perfectly, and relaxed passengers. We were flying over eastern Colorado, approximately an hour and a half after takeoff, when our lives changed forever. I was reviewing some flight documents when a sound I'll never forget echoed through the cockpit. A deafening bang, followed by violent vibration that shook the entire aircraft. "What the hell was that?" Sarah shouted, fighting to maintain control of the aircraft. My eyes immediately shot to the instrument panel, and what I saw made my blood run cold. Red lights were flashing frantically across the entire panel, but one stood out like a nightmare. Engine 2 fire. Fire in engine 2, the right engine. "Sarah, we've got fire in engine 2, I yelled, immediately initiating emergency procedures. "I have the aircraft." "Your aircraft," she responded professionally, despite the tension in her voice. My hands flew across the controls, executing procedures I'd practiced thousands of times in the simulator, but prayed I'd never have to use in real life. First, I cut fuel to the right engine. Then I activated the fire suppression system, releasing the extinguishing agent directly into the engine compartment. But something was terribly wrong. Through the side window, I could see the right engine, or rather, what was left of it. What I saw made me question whether we were living a nightmare or reality. The engine was literally disintegrating in the air. Pieces of metal were flying backward, and a black trail of smoke and fuel marked our path through the sky. "Bob, look at the fuel," Sarah pointed to the indicators. "We're losing fuel fast." She was right. The indicator showed we were losing fuel at an alarming rate, approximately 400 pounds per minute. With the amount we had on board, that gave us, at most, 15 minutes of flight before we'd run out of fuel to keep the aircraft airborne. 15 minutes, I muttered, feeling the weight of that reality crushing my chest. I immediately set the transponder to code 7700, General Emergency, and contacted Denver Center. Denver Center, United 1847 declaring emergency. We have fire and explosion in the right engine with severe fuel loss. Requesting immediate vector to nearest airport. We have approximately 15 minutes of fuel remaining. The controller's voice, which moments before sounded routine and relaxed, instantly changed to a tone of professional urgency. United 1847, emergency received. What's your current position and souls on board? Denver Center, United 1847. Position approximately 50 nautical miles southeast of Denver. 185 souls on board, including crew. Requesting nearest airport options. While awaiting the response, my mind raced at high speed, calculating distances, flight times, and options. Sarah was already checking nearby airports on the electronic chart, but I knew our situation was critical. We were flying over a region where commercial airports were scarce. United 1847, your nearest options are Colorado Springs at 30 nautical miles southeast, Pueblo at 45 miles south, and Lyman at 25 miles east. What's your preference? 25 miles to Lyman. With our current speed, that meant approximately 6 minutes of flight. But Lyman was a small airport with a short runway without adequate emergency equipment. Colorado Springs had a longer runway and better infrastructure but was farther away. Pueblo was somewhere in between. Sarah, what do you think? I asked, keeping my voice calm, but feeling time pressure eroding my tranquility. Colorado Springs has the best infrastructure, but it might be too far. Lyman is closest, but... She hesitated, checking the airport data in the system. The runway is only 5,000 feet. That's cutting it close for a 737 in emergency. She was right. A 737 under normal conditions needs at least 6,000 feet for a safe landing. In an emergency, with possible overweight and only one engine, we'd need even more runway. But every second of hesitation was wasted fuel. Denver Center, United 1847 requesting vector to Colorado Springs. United 1847, cleared direct Colorado Springs. Contact approach on 118.1. I quickly tuned to the new frequency and established contact. Colorado Springs approach. United 1847 emergency, 30 miles northwest. Requesting emergency landing. Right engine explosion, severe fuel loss, 185 souls on board. The response came immediately. United 1847, Colorado Springs approach. Emergency received. Runway in use, 17 left, wind 180 at 8 knots. Emergency equipment being activated. Current altitude? Descending through 22,000 for 10,000. Requesting emergency descent. United 1847, descend and maintain 3,000. Speed your discretion. I initiated an aggressive descent, something that under normal circumstances would be extremely uncomfortable for passengers, but was now a matter of life and death. Every minute longer in the air was fuel we wouldn't have for landing. It was at that moment that Mike, the lead flight attendant, appeared at the cockpit door. His face was pale, but he maintained the professional composure I so admired in him. Bob, the passengers are smelling fuel and heard the explosion. Some are starting to panic. What can I tell them? It was a difficult question. How do you explain to 180 people that you're literally racing against time to save their lives? How do you maintain calm when every fiber of your being is screaming in desperation? Tell them we had a malfunction in the right engine and we're making an unscheduled landing in Colorado Springs as a precaution. Ask them to remain calm and keep their seatbelts fastened. Don't mention the fuel for now. Mike nodded and left quickly. Through the open door, I could hear the passengers' voices. Some calm, others clearly nervous. Children crying, adults asking questions. It was the soundtrack to my worst nightmare. "Bob," Sarah called me, pointing to the instruments. "Oil pressure on engine 1 is dropping." My heart raced even faster. The remaining engine was starting to show problems. If we lost the second engine, our situation would change from critical to impossible. "Monitor closely. If pressure continues dropping, we'll have to consider Lyman." Checking the fuel again, I saw we'd lost another 600 pounds in the last 2 minutes. The math was simple and terrifying. With our current consumption and leak rate, we had at most 8 minutes of flight remaining. Colorado Springs approach, United 1847. Emergency update. We have severe fuel leak and possible problem with remaining engine. We need to land in the next 8 minutes. United 1847 understood. You're cleared for straight-in approach runway 17 left. Emergency equipment positioned. Report runway in sight. 8 minutes. We were approximately 20 nautical miles from Colorado Springs. With our current descent rate, it would be tight, very tight. It was then that my experience of over 20 years in aviation manifested. In extreme situations like this, training takes over and your mind enters an almost mechanical state of problem solving. I began mentally calculating all variables: aircraft weight, approach speed, runway distance, wind, remaining fuel. "Sarah, we're going to do an unstabilized approach. I'm going to maintain high speed until the last moment and make a steep descent. It's risky, but it's our only shot." "Roger, I'm already configuring systems for landing." While Sarah worked with flaps and landing gear, I maintained constant contact with Colorado Springs approach and monitored our progressively failing systems. The right engine, which had exploded, was completely dead. The left engine was functioning, but oil pressure continued dropping slowly. 15 miles to runway, Sarah announced. I looked at the fuel indicator. 6 minutes remaining, maybe 7 if we were lucky. It would be enough, but there was no margin for error. It was at that moment something unexpected happened. The air conditioning system failed, probably due to damage caused by the engine explosion. The cabin began pressurizing inadequately, and I felt my ears pop. "Bob, we're losing pressurization," Sarah yelled. "Oxygen masks," I responded, activating the emergency system. Instantly, oxygen masks dropped throughout the aircraft. The sound of 180 people in panic echoed through the cabin. Mike and his team were working tirelessly to maintain order, but it was a losing battle against the primal fear of being at 10,000 feet in an aircraft that was clearly in serious trouble. 10 miles to runway, Sarah announced, now breathing through her oxygen mask. The fuel now showed less than 5 minutes remaining. We were literally flying at the limit of the possible. If we had to go around for any reason, we wouldn't have fuel for a second attempt. Colorado Springs Tower, United 1847. Runway in sight, fuel critical. We are committed to this approach. United 1847. Runway clear. Wind now 190 at 10 knots. Fire trucks standing by. Through the windscreen, I could finally see the Colorado Springs runway. Never had a sight been so beautiful and at the same time so terrifying. There it was, our salvation, but we were still 8 miles away with fuel running out rapidly. 5 miles to runway, Sarah announced. Landing configuration complete. It was then that the left engine began showing more serious signs of trouble. Oil pressure dropped drastically and temperature began rising. "Sarah, we're losing engine 1 too. We've got to make it on this attempt." "Copy, 3 miles to runway." My mind was working in overdrive, calculating the perfect trajectory to reach the runway with minimum fuel. It was like trying to solve an impossible mathematical equation while lives depended on the right answer. 2 miles to runway. The fuel indicator now showed less than 3 minutes remaining, but more worrying still, the left engine was starting to lose power. I could feel the aircraft becoming increasingly difficult to control. 1 mile to runway. It was at that moment I made a decision that would forever change how I view aviation. I shut down the left engine before it failed completely. It might seem crazy to shut down the only functioning engine, but a failing engine can cause more problems than a controllably shut down engine. Besides, without engine power, our aircraft would essentially become a very heavy glider, but a glider I could still control. "Engine 1 intentionally shut down," I announced to Sarah and the tower. "Bob, are you sure?" Sarah asked, but without questioning my decision. She trusted me, and that trust was all I needed at that moment. Trust me. The aircraft was now on final approach with no engines running. The silence was deafening, only the sound of wind passing over the fuselage and the whine of hydraulic systems. It was a situation no commercial pilot should face, but there we were, gliding toward the runway at Colorado Springs. 500 feet to runway. My concentration was absolute. Every movement of the yoke was calculated. Every wind correction was precise. I had only one chance to get the landing right, and 180 lives depended on my ability to do something I'd only practiced in the simulator. 200 feet. The runway was growing rapidly ahead of us. I could see the fire trucks positioned on the sides, emergency lights flashing, ground personnel anxiously awaiting the outcome of our approach. 100 feet, 50 feet, 30 feet. "Bob, speed a bit high," Sarah alerted me. She was right. We were approximately 10 knots above ideal landing speed, but slowing down now would risk not reaching the runway. It was a calculated risk I had to accept. 10 feet, 5 feet, and then, finally, we felt the gentle touch of the main landing gear on the runway, but our problems were far from over. With excessive speed and without the aid of engine thrust reversers to brake, I had to use only wheel brakes to stop 180 people and a 150,000-pound aircraft. "Maximum brakes!" I yelled, pressing the brake pedals with all my force. I could feel the wheels locking and unlocking rapidly as the anti-skid system tried to maintain traction with the runway. The aircraft shook violently as we decelerated, and through the side windows I saw the runway passing at high speed. 3,000 feet of runway remaining, Sarah announced, monitoring our position. 2,000 feet. 1,000 feet. At that point, I was starting to worry whether we'd be able to stop before the end of the runway. The wheels were smoking due to heat generated by friction, and I could feel the brakes starting to lose efficiency. 500 feet remaining. It was when I made the last critical decision of that terrifying flight. I activated the emergency brakes, a system that should only be used in absolutely extreme situations because it could cause significant damage to the aircraft, but would provide maximum braking force possible. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The aircraft decelerated so violently that everyone was thrown forward against their seatbelts. I could hear screams from the passenger cabin, but they were screams of surprise, not terror, because finally, gloriously, our aircraft stopped completely just 100 feet from the end of the runway. "Stopped on runway," I announced, my voice trembling for the first time during the entire flight. The silence that followed was the most beautiful sound I'd ever heard in my life. No more engine noise, no more whine of emergency systems, no more constant fear that we wouldn't make it, just silence. "United 1847, welcome to Colorado Springs," came the emotional voice of the air traffic controller. "Outstanding job." Sarah and I looked at each other for a moment, both trying to process what we'd just lived through. 15 minutes earlier, we were facing an impossible situation with 180 lives in our hands. Now we were safely stopped on the runway at Colorado Springs. "Bob," Sarah said softly, removing her oxygen mask, "you just pulled off the most incredible landing I've ever witnessed, but I knew it hadn't been just my work." Sarah had been perfect throughout the entire emergency, executing every checklist, monitoring every system, and providing the critical information I needed to make decisions. Mike and his cabin crew had kept 180 passengers relatively calm during a situation that could easily have caused total panic. "We did this," I replied. "All of us." The next few minutes were a mixture of relief and emergency procedures. The firefighters quickly reached the aircraft, checking for fire risks or fuel leaks. Passengers were evacuated through emergency slides, a controlled and orderly evacuation, very different from the chaotic evacuations we sometimes see in other emergencies. While passengers were being taken to the terminal, I remained in the cockpit with Sarah, completing post-emergency checklists and documenting everything that had happened. It was important to record every detail while it was still fresh in our memory, both for the investigation that would surely follow and for other pilots who might face similar situations in the future. It was only when I finally shut down all aircraft systems and removed my headset that the reality of what we'd lived through really hit me. My hand was shaking when I extended it to turn off the last switch. 20 years of career, thousands of flights, and I'd never been so close to losing an aircraft and all the lives on board. Mike appeared at the cockpit door once more, but this time with a smile on his face. "Bob, all passengers are safe in the terminal. Many are asking about you too. They want to thank you personally." It was comforting to know everyone was okay, but I was still processing the experience. During the emergency, there's no time for fear, only for action. It's only afterward, when everything's over, that you really understand how close you came to disaster. Sarah and I walked together through the empty aircraft toward the terminal. The marks of our experience were everywhere, oxygen masks still hanging from overhead compartments, some personal items scattered on the floor due to the abrupt maneuvers, and a residual smell of fuel that reminded all of us how serious our problems had been. In the terminal, we were greeted by a touching scene. Many passengers were waiting specifically to see us. Some had tears in their eyes, others wanted to shake our hands, and several people asked to take photos with us. An elderly lady, who must have been about 70, hugged me and whispered in my ear, "Thank you for bringing me back to my family." Moments like that remind me why I chose to be a pilot. It's not just about flying aircraft or mastering complex technology. It's about responsibility, the sacred responsibility to protect the lives that are placed in our hands every time we close the cockpit door. In the days that followed, the FAA investigation revealed that the engine explosion had been caused by an extremely rare failure in the high-pressure turbine. A part that had passed all scheduled maintenance inspections but had a microscopic manufacturing defect that manifested catastrophically during flight. The investigation report concluded that the crew's actions, specifically the decision to preventively shut down the left engine and the technique of landing without engines, had been fundamental in avoiding a tragedy. It was professional recognition I appreciated, but which didn't diminish the emotional impact of the experience. Flying again after an incident like this requires significant mental strength. For weeks after the event, I found myself reliving every moment of those 15 minutes. Every takeoff was accompanied by extra vigilance of the engines. Every unusual noise awakened heightened attention. But commercial aviation is built on redundancies and safety. The incident we experienced, though traumatic, was also a demonstration of how training, procedures, and technology can work together to save lives even in the most extreme circumstances. Sarah continued flying with me on several occasions after the incident. Our shared experience created an even deeper professional trust. She often jokes that now she knows she can trust me even when I decide to shut down our last functioning engine 1 mile from the runway. Mike also continued working in commercial aviation and became an emergency instructor for flight attendants. He uses our experience as a case study on how to maintain calm and control during a real crisis. Many passengers from that flight stayed in touch with us through social media, It's touching to see how those 15 minutes of terror transformed into lasting human connections. Some sent photos of their families gathered at Christmas. Others shared important milestones in their lives, always mentioning how every moment became more precious after our shared experience. Today, when I tell this story to other pilots, I always emphasize some fundamental points that made the difference between life and death that day. First, the importance of teamwork. Sarah, Mike, and the entire crew functioned like a well-oiled machine during the emergency. Each person knew exactly what their role was and executed it perfectly. In aviation, there's no place for egos or individual heroism, only for professionals working together. Second, the need to make quick decisions with incomplete information. When you have only 15 minutes to save 180 lives, there's no time for prolonged analysis or manual consultations. Training and experience must manifest instantly. Third, the importance of maintaining calm even when everything seems lost. Throughout the entire emergency, Sarah and I maintained calm and professional voices in radio communications. This not only helped us think clearly, but also conveyed confidence to air traffic controllers and cabin crew. Fourth, the need to be prepared to make unconventional decisions. Preventively shutting down a functioning engine goes against every pilot's instinct, but it was the right decision under those specific circumstances. Sometimes safety requires thinking outside standard procedures. Finally, the importance of constant simulator practice. Although no simulator can exactly replicate the stress and complexity of a real emergency, repetitive practice of emergency procedures creates muscle memory that manifests when we need it most. The 737 we flew that day never returned to service. The damage caused by the engine explosion and emergency landing was too extensive for economical repair. But that aircraft, N847UA, saved 180 lives that day through its robust design and system redundancies. Sometimes people ask me if I'm afraid to fly after an experience like that. The answer is no. Quite the opposite. That experience showed me that even under the worst possible circumstances, with multiple system failures and time running out, training, experience and teamwork can overcome any challenge. Modern aviation is extraordinarily safe precisely because we learn from incidents like ours. Every emergency, every failure, every lesson learned contributes to making future flights safer for everyone. Today, when I do my walk around before each flight, visually checking the aircraft, I always spend a few extra seconds observing the engines, not out of fear, but out of respect. Respect for the complexity of the machine we command and the responsibility we carry. Those 15 minutes over eastern Colorado changed my perspective on many things. They made me appreciate every safe landing more, every flight without incidents, every moment I can spend with my family. They taught me that life can change in seconds, but that proper training and preparation can make the difference between tragedy and miracle. When young pilots ask me about this experience, I always tell them I sincerely hope they never have to face something similar. But if they do, to remember they were trained for it, to trust their team, and never give up while options are still available. Aviation taught me there's no luck in safety, there's only preparation meeting opportunity. That day, our preparation met the opportunity to save 180 lives. It was the most terrifying flight of my career, but also the most significant. And even today, years later, I still get a chill when I hear an engine fail in the simulator during recurrent training. But it's a chill of respect, not fear, because I know that if necessary, I can do it all again. All of us can. Because in the end, that's what we prepare for our entire professional career. For those rare but critical moments when 180 lives depend on 15 minutes of perfect decision-making. And when those moments come, we're ready. That's the promise we make every time we put on our uniform and enter the cockpit. It's a silent but sacred promise that we'll do everything in our power to bring every passenger safely to their destination. 15 minutes. That was the time we had to save 180 people, and we succeeded. Not by luck, not by miracle, but because that's exactly what we dedicate our professional lives to. And if you're listening to this story, it means you're interested in the world of aviation and the experiences we live in the skies. If you enjoyed this account and want to hear more real stories from pilots who faced impossible situations and lived to tell their experiences, subscribe to the Black Box channel. Every story we share here is a testament to the dedication, training, and courage of professionals who make commercial aviation the safest means of transportation in the world. Leave your comment telling us which aspect of this story impressed you most, and don't forget to share with friends who are also interested in aviation. In the next episode, you'll hear about the day a pilot had to land a Boeing 737 with locked landing gear and only 15 minutes of fuel remaining. Until then, always fly safe.